Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your particular business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel that you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be chatting here one day soon. And my guest today is a pitch and presentation specialist, TEDx coach, and the founder of The Red Effect. She's the author of The Authority Guide to Pitching Your Business. In other words, how to make an impact and be remembered in under a minute. We'll come back to that. And she's a fellow and past president of the Professional Speaking Association in Scotland. I'm delighted to welcome Mel Sherwood to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Mel.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, there's loads of stuff there we'll come back to, but unfortunately, I'm going to drag you back a bit in your life to your last year in school. I do this to all my guests because I'm always interested, what was on their mind? Where were they going? Had they got a career mapped out?
Well, I had decided that I wanted to be an actor,
All right.
a performer. So in my last year of high school, or in the lead up to that, I decided that I wasn't going to do the traditional route of a final year of high school, and I went and took myself off and did what was known at the time as a tertiary orientation program. And the subjects that I studied were English, drama production, film and cinema studies, and dance. So I got my final high school certificate with those subjects.
Gosh, your parents must have been delighted with that one.
I didn't realize until recently. We actually had a conversation recently, and I hadn't realized that I had just told them that that's what I was doing. Because, obviously my parents and all the careers advisors tried to steer me away from that and said I needed something behind me. And that was, 97% of actors are out of work at any given time. What do you want to go into that field for? But I had a vision and a passion, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I had a great time in high school.
Well, they say, so many people, instead of following their passion, lived their life out in quiet desperation. So at least you ticked more than that one box in one go.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sorry at all. I learned so much during that particular year about myself and about the world of performing as well. So it was really useful.
And so did you discover that this wasn't the road to gold and riches?
Did I discover it? I think I already knew that. I was pretty realistic about it. And what's interesting is that a lot of people in the arts almost, take a vow of poverty. So I never expected that I wasn't looking for wealth and fame. That was not what was driving me. It was that I had a passion for performing. I loved it. And I was hoping to be able to do that in my for my career.
And I suppose, were you one of those people who was sort of slightly introvert and yet when put on stage sort of lights up the whole audience?
Yeah, I call myself an introvert, and I do partly the definition around introversion is, that I don't get my energy from being around people. I get it from being by myself. So there is an element of that. And I think I feel like I might have been a little bit more extroverted when I was younger, but I think that was an adapted behavior. I felt like I should be, so I was. Whereas as I've got older, I respect my own self more and understand myself more. So I think, there's a term ambivert.
Right.
And I think I probably fit into that, where I can adapt to different situations. I can certainly be an extrovert when I need to, but my natural tendency is to be an introvert.
All right. I suppose there was a time in your life going to come along where you had to get a real job.
Yeah. Well, actually, after I studied my final year at high school, I applied to get into university because, of course, all the advice was get a degree, get something behind you. And so I got into university to study teaching and drama teaching and teaching drama in English. But I chose not to go to university because there was something more exciting. And that was a brand new course that was being run. It was a 2-year course, and it was a certificate in performing arts. And it covered not only the performing aspect, but all the backstage part. We did makeup, design, set design, lighting design, costume design. We did puppetry making, comedy, circus skills. It was a real mix of things, lighting production, stage management, and I just loved the variety. And I came out of that again thinking, would I go back and do university, or would I travel, which lots of people that I knew were. But after doing that, I decided I needed to get a real job. And actually, part of the impetus was because I wanted to get my teeth straightened. So I needed to earn some money to get my teeth straightened. And I applied for a retail job with a big retailer in Australia, thinking I would be there for 6 months to save some money and then get my teeth straightened and continue on with my acting career. And I ended up working with that organization for 15 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I suppose it must have been quite interesting because certainly the course gave you really a broad range of skills around the whole area of performance and stage, which I'm sure you've managed to retain and bring to your life now, which we'll get onto later.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I use all of that, and I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity, actually.
So anyway, back to retail and a large retailer in Australia. How did you find that? I mean, you're going to have to adapt to it. I'm afraid the world of retailing is not the one that'll normally set you on fire.
Well, I loved it. My very first job, actually, when I was 14 years and 9 months, I applied for a job at a local store which was called the Bra Shop, which at that age all the boys thought was hilarious that I was working there as the Saturday girl. So I'd started in retail, and throughout my teens I'd worked in retail, and I loved it. I loved that customer service aspect. So when I applied for this full-time job, it was in a customer service role. But very quickly I got opportunities, and I got opportunities to work in the back office and learn all the back office systems and invoicing and a lot of administration type procedures. And then after probably 5 years or so, I ended up going to their head office and working in customer relations, and moving into marketing and communications type roles, which I loved. But the great thing was I had really supportive managers who recognized that happy employees who were able to fulfill their passion would be
Right.
a more loyal employee. So I was able to flex my working hours quite often. I was able to use my holidays and take time off when I needed to audition for things, or if I had a few days filming on something. So it was very flexible, and because of that, they probably got more of my loyalty and my commitment to that role. But I did love it. I loved the people I worked with, and I loved what I was doing, and I loved the opportunity to keep learning. And
I,
it's
I'll
one
tell
thing
you
I
one
do
thing is
throughout my life.
it shows what a sort of thoughtful management system that was in the place that recognized the needs of its employees and was prepared to facilitate them in their extracurricular activities, if I'd call it that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the entire organization, but I think the managers that I had quite often had a connection, either a son or a daughter or a sister or whatever, who was right into performing arts, and
Right.
so they recognized that passion and supported it really. So I was very, very fortunate in that sense.
And one thing I just wanted to ask you about, and I've come across this time and time again, people who work in sort of the frontline staff of a particular organization and then go to head office. I've often seen it's two different cultures. How did you find it with your own particular organization?
Yeah, it was a little bit, and I think it was interesting because of that my customer service focus, and then when I went to head off, it was all about customer service. But again, really amazing manager in there who was very focused on that culture and making sure that um, the gap was reduced or minimized. And I think it was great to be able to have that experience on the shop floor, and then to be able to be in the head office and to be interacting with the buyers, and to have that perspective, and to be constantly focused on the customer, the end person, because I'd been there. I used to do work on the refunds counter and the
Right.
complaints desk and all of that, so I knew. And then when I was in customer relations, a lot of that was helping customers find a product that they couldn't get in a certain store or whatever. But then it was dealing with complaints, and the great thing was you never knew what you were going to get you pick up the
No,
phone, you
you
just never
don't.
knew. But one of the things that I loved about my managers in there and the whole culture was we never ever spoke badly about a customer it was just, our customers were what were keeping us employed, what was keeping this business going. And I had noticed sometimes when I was in the organization on the shop floor, you're having a bad day, you say, oh, that customer really annoyed me, or just, oh, here's
Sure.
Mr. Such and Such again, But actually, yeah, it really helped me turn my head around about that, and just make sure that that was at the forefront of everything. And obviously in business, our customers are what pay our bills, so we have to be focused on that. I'm really grateful for that grounding.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable lesson for a lot of people. They don't realize that this sort of toxic talk about customers and clients in the background can spread throughout the organization, and it just becomes that sort of toxic culture without it just permeates without you realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, you managed to change many different roles. So you got to see the organization from so many different sides, from management through. But you had other ambitions, and you decided to take a gap year, I understand.
I did. So I worked flexibly up until I was about 30 in different roles. Then I moved into a full-time marketing role, and I had sort of, during my 20s, I sort of sung in a 60s girl band and traveled around
Oh, tell
Australia
us about
doing
that.
that. And
Tell us about that for a minute.
oh, that was brilliant. So yeah, the whole beehive wigs, false eyelashes, fancy costumes, I loved it. And again, that enabled me to use all of my skills and passion. So I designed and made the costumes, I did the choreography, I performed, obviously, and that was a really good time in my life. But interestingly, a mixed time, because I had always been quite paranoid about my singing voice, which is a
Right.
whole nother story that we don't need to get into today. But
Right.
it was quite a challenge for me, in terms of imposter syndrome, and
All right. Yeah.
battling with self-esteem issues, where it was a trio, and that we shared the lead vocals, and it was very even, but I always felt like people would think I was the weak link.
All right.
And
Yeah.
so I battled a lot with what was going on in my head. But I think one of the things that helped was being able to, we were playing characters essentially. And
Sure.
so I was always better at playing a character and singing than actually singing as myself. And then I eventually have since sung as myself. But yeah, it took a lot of personal development work and therapy and whatever to get me where I needed to go.
Yeah.
But that time it was really fabulous. And then it came to a natural end when I was about 30. And around that time I got married, and then that marriage broke down. And so in 2005, I decided to take the gap year that I had never taken. And I
Right.
packed my bags and went back backpacking. I flew to the States and did a very short trip there, and then flew to Europe and traveled around Europe for 4 months or so. And my intention was to work in the UK for 6 months, save some money, and then travel back to Australia via Africa,
All
and to
right.
be away for, a maximum of 9 to 12 months. And 16 years later, I'm still living in the UK, in Scotland. So, yeah, life didn't necessarily turn out the way I anticipated it would.
Well, you can't blame COVID on your inability to travel, can you?
That's it.
So, what sort of enamored you about the UK and particularly Scotland?
Well, I was drawn to Scotland, to Edinburgh, because of the Edinburgh Festival
Oh,
Fringe
yes, of
and
course. Yeah.
my background as a performer. So, and I had been wondering where I would live. The typical route is for Australians to live in London. I loved London, but I didn't want to live there, and I didn't know where I wanted to live. But I was drawn to Edinburgh, so I arrived with my backpack, arrived in a truck, actually. I got a lift from this little village I was living in England randomly. So I arrived at 1 a.m. in the morning and started my life, and all I knew was that I wanted to get a job at the Fringe office. But I did know I needed a job straight away. So the day after I arrived, I got a temp job in an insurance company. And then 3 weeks later, I managed to land myself a job at the Fringe office. And I worked there for about 7 or 8 months, I think. And then got another temp job as an administrator in an HR department. And from there, I had a whole lot of opportunities to work in learning and development,
All
which
right.
another career that I fell into, was given an opportunity, said yes, and jumped in. And loved that again. Everything that I've done in my life, I've really loved because I love learning. I love,
Mm,
embracing new skills. So, but I think learning and development was great because it combined all of my different backgrounds, the ability to stand up and speak in front of people. And
mm.
I had an opportunity. Someone went on maternity leave. I was working as a PA to the head of HR at the time,
All right. Yeah.
and he said, I you know do I think you'd be great at this. Do you want the opportunity to caretake the role while this other person is on maternity leave? And I jumped at the chance, but having no background in learning and development. So then I suddenly had to go off and learn how to do that and learn how. That's
Right.
how I got into public speaking, because my first course that I had to design and deliver was a presentation skills course. And my boss had said, "Oh, you can stand up in front of people." I'm like, "Well, I better find out how to actually do this, how to structure a talk." And so I went off to Toastmasters, and I was fortunate to learn a lot there, and entered in some competitions which I won, and learnt so much during that process. And so, yeah, the learning and development, being able to draw on the performing background, and as well as all of that experience that I'd had in business, where I was delivering courses on customer expectations and customer service, and all the soft skills type uh, things, and then a little bit of your general outlook and word training and that sort of thing, although that wasn't my area of expertise. So yeah, did that until I loved it, until I
Great.
didn't love it, and then I stopped.
Well, do you know what I think is quite interesting? If we just stop for a second there and just reflect on what's happened. I mean, obviously picking up the skills and being comfortable with people, being able to stand up and talk to them and feel comfortable in front of an audience, which is a skill a lot of people, struggle with.
Hmm.
And then to be part of an organization where you learned all about the customer and the customer experience and the importance of it, and then how to manage that. And then by saying yes to it, something that you really didn't know quite how to do, you were able to upskill yourself very quickly, put the two together, and suddenly are now delivering value to an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was interesting, that even my marketing skills came into that, because I had to promote the courses that were the learning and development program that we were creating. And it was a very small learning and development department. It was just me. There was no one else. So
All right.
I was doing everything, which again is what, I love, that variety, and being able to kind of take a project and work it through. So yeah, that was a great time again in my life. I learned a lot and really enjoyed myself.
If we talk about Toastmasters just for a minute, because again, a lot of our audience might be thinking of learning to stand up and speak, just talk about Toastmasters for a minute, the sort of what they do and who their typical audience would be.
Sure. So it's an international organization, and it focuses on helping people with their leadership and communication skills. I haven't been involved for quite a while, but certainly at the time I was there was a program that took people through. So you did a series of speeches that took you through understanding how to structure a speech, how to deliver it, how to use vocal variety, how to use body language, how to persuade an audience. So it's kind of took you through. And the most there's clubs all over the world. They meet often every fortnight, I think, and they are run by volunteers. So each week different people will take different roles in the meeting,
Sure.
and it gives you an opportunity to stand up and speak and be evaluated. And a lot of it is around it's a really supportive organization, so everything gets applauded, and so there's lots of positive support, but also there's evaluation and constructive feedback that helps people improve as they go. So yeah, a really great organization for people to build their confidence and their public speaking
And
skills.
certainly you're on an entry level, but you were going to take it to another level here. So tell us more of where you were going to go after all this learning development, and suddenly thinking to yourself, well, I think I've had enough of that. I'd like to place my
So
energy and passion elsewhere.
I had always wanted to run my own business. And so my partner at the time and I came up with an idea for an online platform for the performing arts industry.
All
And
right.
I was really keen on an online business, and we sort of put our heads together, and we were both involved in performing arts, and we'd met actually doing a show. And so we came up with this idea, and we were all excited about it. And the plan was that I would leave my job and set up this business. And when it got to the point of needing another employee, he would leave his job and come and run the business with me. And so I pitched it to a startup accelerator.
All right.
So I went along and I pitched it for a place on the program because I had no idea about business. And I thought I better go and find out about this. Like anything that I do, I was like, oh, better go and find out how to do this. So the people who were running the program said, look, we're not totally sure that that idea is particularly feasible as a scalable business, but we like you and your enthusiasm and your commitment. So come along, we'll put you on the program and you can prove to us that it's a feasible idea. So it was, I left my well paid, secure, very happy job on a Friday and I started in the Startup Accelerator on a Monday. And it was only then that I started to research whether that might be a good idea or not.
Right.
Recommend that to other people. But what happened as part of that research, I realized that everyone I spoke to in the industry and who would use this platform thought it was a brilliant idea. But there was one major flaw in the idea, and that was no one was prepared to pay for it.
All
So
right.
there went the
Okay.
business idea. At the same time, I had done an NLP practitioner course, which I'd always wanted to do. And so I had to think about, well, what would be my alternative? And I had a limiting belief that wasn't really connected with my intuition. But what that course showed me was that I was in touch with my intuition. I knew definitely what I didn't want, and I didn't want to pursue the business idea that we'd come up with, because even if it would have made money, I realized that it wasn't playing to my strengths, and I would have maybe ended up as a website administrator, and
Sure.
nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't playing to my strengths. I could do it, but I wouldn't have been lit up every day. And so what was interesting is that despite the fact that it being a rubbish business idea, I was really good at pitching it. And
Right.
so other people from the program kept asking me, could I help them with their pitches? And then I got opportunities to run workshops in the program and that sort of thing. So I built up my skills and my understanding of what it meant to pitch a business. At the same time, I also had a concern when I went to networking events, seeing people really doing themselves a disservice, not being able to clearly and confidently talk about their business. And so it all started to come together that all of my skills from my past came together to help me, with the coaching and training and weaving in the element of performance, because of my background, I'm really interested in how we use our bodies, our voices, our minds, and our hearts to really connect with and engage an audience. So that's, this all these different influences, I suppose, I bring to the work that I do now. And that business just kind of took off, and it's grown organically, and I've had lots of opportunities, and I've put myself forward for opportunities too. It's one of those things, I had an opportunity to pitch in front of 600 people at an event in Glasgow, and someone who was a guest of the Royal Bank of Scotland was in the audience, and he saw me pitch and got in touch. And I was also happened to be sitting at a table with Scottish Enterprise,
Right.
who had a tender out, and they said, "Oh, this might be something that you would be interested in," and they offered me the opportunity to quote for some work. And literally from those two conversations, my business started, and I haven't looked back.
Just before we develop that conversation a bit further, maybe you might tell our audience where they might find out more about you, Mel.
Sure. My website is melsherwood.com, and you can pretty much find me on any social media platform as Mel Sherwood. So feel free to get in touch. I love to hear from people. Connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter, DM me, whatever you like. I love hearing from people.
Let's just move on, because this is a very important aspect of a service that you provide that people really, I don't think, fully understand the value of. Let's just talk about pitching and presenting yourself to an audience in terms of, for the first time, the value of it, and why people are so poor at doing it.
Yeah, I don't, it's quite interesting because I think we all know first impressions count, and we can never get a second chance to make a good first impression. But quite often people will show up to a networking event, for example, not having thought through what it is that they're looking for, who they want to connect with, and really being clear about what it is that they offer people. And that's the key. When people ask you, what do you do, they don't care about what you do, they care about what you can do for them. So you need to be able to articulate what you do in a way that intrigues them and gets them curious to to want to know more. But I think one of the big challenges is that when people says, what do you do? That's not your opportunity to just talk for 10 minutes at them about everything that you do. And that's one of the mistakes that people make. And so that's why I talk about two different types of pitches. I talk about the conversational pitch, that very short answer to the question, what do you do? Which is maybe, 10 to 15 words, that makes people curious to know more and goes, oh, I want to know more, or I know someone who needs that. And then the other part of the pitch, the elevator pitch, I suppose, which is your 30 to 60 seconds, so maybe 90 seconds, depending on how much time you've got. And so I think being able to do that and understand how to explain what you do, what problem you solve, how you help your customers, perhaps incorporate a bit of a very short case study or example to bring that to life. Being able to do that in 1 minute is great, but it's not always required. We don't always stand up and talk about our business for a minute. But once you've actually worked on that pitch, then you have the opportunity to weave it into conversation and to get a consistent message when you're talking to people so that they understand. And the great thing is when you're really clear on it, then people automatically know and they say, oh, I need you, or I know someone who needs you. Or when down the track, and if you've made a good impression and you've had an impact in that very first interaction, people will remember you. And so down the track, 3 weeks time, when they hear someone saying, oh, I need some help with such and such, oh, I know just the person.
Exactly.
And it's because you've made that great impression and you've been memorable.
One of the strange things that's always amazed me, and I'm sure you will confirm this to me, that the number of organizations, if you were to walk in and ask two people in it, what do you do here? You wouldn't get a consistent answer.
You're right, actually. And I did some great work with an organization who sadly are not in existence anymore because of lack of funding. But they brought me in and we looked at helping them get that conversational pitch, that their value statement, I suppose. What is it that this organization does and who do they do it for? So that everybody knew, and there was a team of 15. Everybody had contributed to that so that everybody was comfortable with how it sounded and how they were describing the organization. And then we also did the next level where they all had their own elevator pitch on how they supported the work of the organization. And it was so cohesive and comprehensive. So all of that went on the website and, on people's, strap lines on their emails and that sort of thing. And it was great because it just made it so clear for everyone, and everyone felt like, yeah, okay, this is how we support the wider goal and our ultimate customers. And this is my role within it. And it was great being able to see that. And I think all organizations should consider that so that there is this consistent message.
Yes, and I mean, you're the epitome of that in terms of branding and style as well. You live the brand. Maybe you might just tell our audience, some will see this in video, but others on the radio won't pick it up. Just talk about brand for the sort of last minute or so that we've got here.
Sure. So I think I've created a whole new program around the red effect. And it's interesting that came about because someone picked up on the fact that everyone associated the color red with me. And so there's a whole nother story about that, which we haven't got time to go into. But since I really embraced that, I already had some red in my brand, but Sure. Then I recognized how that consistent visual is working for me as well. And with the actual program, the red effect and the statement, I talk about being more red, and but red's an acronym, but I'm still using that color as well. So I think for me, there is an element of, being consistent in the way that I show up. There is an argument for being, I don't know, we talk about authenticity and all of that sort of thing.
Sure.
And, I am authentically me, but I also have other elements of me, which I sometimes share on social media just to make sure that people don't think that I'm totally polished all the time. But if people want to work with me, I think it's important for them to know that this is that I walk my talk.
Yeah, and that's very, very important. So you have a consistent look and you also have a consistent image.
Yeah.
Which is good. So final to the message, tell our audience where they might find out more about you again, Mel, as we sort of wrap up the show.
Absolutely. So my website is melsherwood.com. And you can find me on any social media channel as Mel Sherwood.
Great. Well, what a fantastic interview. I thoroughly enjoyed that. A special thanks to our guest, Mel Sherwood, for coming into the You and Your Business studio today. And thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company, and please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business. And as we say in Ireland, Shinna will. Yeah.